Say in your mind, say to yourself, I am more than my physical body. Because I am more than physical matter, I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world. I deeply desire to expand, to experience, to know, to understand, to control, to use such greater energies and energy systems as may be beneficial and constructive to me and to those who follow me. I deeply desire the help and cooperation, the assistance, the understanding of those individuals whose wisdom, development, and experience are equal to or greater than my own. I ask their guidance and protection from any influence or any source that might provide me with less than my stated desires.
Do not know all the answers to the questions about reality. Do not claim to know the ultimate truth about time. I seek that which has been made hidden as a part of a family of explorers of consciousness. I'm the void.
Let's go.
Welcome to Lighting the Void.
Broadcasting live from a shack on a hill in the Mossy Creek bottoms of King Creek, Arkansas. This is Late Start Lighting the Void. We got a late start. Welcome. It's Tuesday, the 15th, October the 15th, 2024. In this broadcast here live on the Fringe FM, fringe.fm, and as well as live on YouTube, anywhere else they pick up the audio broadcast. Remember, the fringe.fm is always a project of love. So we have the Fringe FM podcast, which I'm cutting up the first episode, trying to anyways, with everything that's going on. And then we have the Fringe FM live stream, and it's now value for value. So there's a page on fringe.fm at the radio station where you can drop artwork, jingles, you can leave dedications. What I want to do is build that live stream up with the best of what everybody wants, especially like if you guys drop it there, we'll put it up on the stream, right? We'll segment it out, program and all that stuff. I apologize about my tardiness, but it's Tuesday. Tuesdays are kind of rough because I'm 3 days in a row into work. I wake up at 3:30 in the morning, just so you know. Not making excuses, but this is a pretty valid one. I wake up at 3:30 in the morning, and I walk a mile to work, and it was cold this morning. And then I'll work, and then I'll walk home. And then I tried to help my dad put the motor in, and at some point I passed out. Woke up, and Juan wants to play on the internet, and I always play with Juan over at his one-on-one media channel. And now I got about 30 minutes to take a shower, get something to eat, get some coffee, and figure out what we're going to do the show about. That's my Tuesday. And by the way, if you guys want to check out something really, really cool, okay, if you listen to podcasts, there's an audio drama, and I think I've mentioned this before, and we'll get into this tonight too. But it's called On the Edge of Sleep. Now it's fiction, but it's so cool. So while I'm walking down the road at 3:30 in the morning. That's around the witching hour. It's dark. There are no, like, most of the people's street lights aren't working for some reason on this road. No idea why. So it's pretty dark. I can see the shadows of like trees and stuff in the woods. I can't make out anything. The only thing that I can make out is, like the stars. And I'm listening to this podcast while I'm walking. And I also take this 6-iron, this King Cobra 6-iron with me that I, out of my old golf bag in case that dog attacks me. So I'll walk with that too. So it kind of looks like I'm this, if you're coming back from a distance, I look like an old blind man walking down the road. But anyways, I'm walking down the road and number one, I realize I need a new pair of shoes. My feet are killing me. And then number two, I'm listening to this show called On the Edge of Sleep. If you haven't heard this podcast, they haven't endorsed. I don't affiliate with them in any kind of way. Don't know them. But I'm an audio guy. I love audio, man. And this the audio drama called On the Edge of Sleep is killer. I wish they would have made a second season, but it was the first time I found myself scared of the dark in a long time. Because there's a part in that series, I don't want to give it totally away, but it's really cool. The premise of this story is if you fall asleep, you die. It's really cool. Especially like right before Halloween. So I'm walking down the road at 3:30 in the morning, freezing. And this kind of sleep demon, right at the darkest part of the road, right? This kind of sleep demon comes on the podcast and starts, messing with the main character in the story. Dude, it was so, my heart sped up really fast. It's so, I want at least one of you, if you have time. It's called, I was just talking to Juan about it. On the Edge of, is it The Edge of Sleep or On the Edge of Sleep by Q Code? One of the coolest audio dramas, besides Alex Exum's audio dramas, by the way, that we're doing again for Halloween this year. I'll give you the name of it right now. Hopefully. Yeah, it's called The Edge of Sleep. And it'll have a picture of like this dude with a triangle on it. I don't think you can see it on the camera. Yeah, you can't really see it. But thanks to the Domex, I got a phone so I can listen to this stuff, man, while I'm walking down the road. I freaked myself out, man. Big time, Arkansas dog men or neighbor dogs. Bro, that's the thing is like all these people are, I have the earbuds in and I'm listening to while I'm walking. And right when I got to the darkest part, it was so perfect. Like the sleep demon starts talking to this guy, trying to mess with him. And I didn't think I was 42 years old and afraid of the dark still, but I guess I was. My heart sped up, man. It must have been racing. I was trying to walk faster to the nearest street light, All right, here we go. So we're going to get into interesting subject tonight. If you're into the occult or the tarot, please go check out the latest video that we put up. It's an hour series about the Tower card. Fascinating stuff there. But let's just say hi to Gareth real quick. I'm going to see if I can do this better this time. For those of you who don't know, Gareth, you have to go back into the, into the videos and figure it out, right? Gareth is a void walker, just like you and me. But
I just bought Robert Monroe's first book. Richard's going to be busy.
the audiobook. Did you get the audiobook? I always get so stoked when people buy the Robert Monroe's books. Like the last podcast I was on, Nico said he listened to all 3 books like 3 times or something. I was so proud of him. But hopefully you can get Richard on board. Did you get the audio book or the real book? That's the big question.
Nope, the real book. My eyes are too tired to rear books these days, so I get Richard to read them for me. It's also a good way of getting him on board.
That's cool. There's always a skeptic in the crowd, right? Someone that doesn't want to, like, again, how's the out-of-body experience not the most important thing on the planet? Why aren't people talking about it? It's a good idea, though, to get Richard to read them to you. But you got to keep me posted. We got to get Richard to that vibratory state. He's going to trip, you know. And that was the last thing I said to him. And I haven't, it was months after I talked to Gareth after that. I started, anytime I don't hear from Gareth, I begin to worry, you know, because sometimes he has bad episodes. And then I got this message here, I think. Yeah. I think it was about a month later, probably. I want to say it was a month later. Gareth loves everybody here, by the way. See what it says here. It's taking a minute. Also, make sure you check out
Hello,
William
my friend.
William
It's
Gilman's
3
stuff.
a.m. here and I can't sleep. So I'm just annoying Richard. I thought this would interest you. I've been listening daily to Bowman's CDs. Well, for the last 2 nights, I'm convinced I've been out of body. I was asleep when I suddenly felt as if I was in an earthquake. There are no earthquakes here in Wales. And before I knew it, I was as light as the wind and I could move. It was wonderful and I was crying with joy. I was then in a field next to a river and my dog came to me. He was younger, full of energy, and I spent what felt like hours playing with him, throwing sticks into the river. I woke up and was not happy to be back. But wow, what an experience. Love you, brother.
Wow, dude. That's awesome. That's what I want to hear, man. That's one of the greatest conscious experience I've ever heard. No way. Dude. Can I tell everybody about this on the show? I mean, because this is pretty cool, man. I'd like to talk to everybody about it.
Of course, mate. You can tell anyone.
Cool. So, yeah, then he sends me some messages about some stuff. And then I got this message from Richard. He sent some, you know, here's the thing, man. While Gareth was struggling with ALS, while he's going through all of this stuff, he was trying to get guests on the show. He was trying to support the show, man. Like, if I talk about this too much, I'm going to start crying like a baby on the air. So then it was a few months later. I want to say a few weeks later. And then I got this message. Which...
Hello, Joe. It's Richard here. Gareth was rushed into hospital on Friday as he began to choke on his saliva. He has pneumonia and it's touch and go if he'll be with us. We're all breaking our hearts and hoping that he'll pull through. He made me promise to him that if anything happened, that I would inform those who meant the most to him.
And this was the next message that I got. Takes a second for it to come through.
He has considered you like a brother, even though he has not known you for long. He told me that he felt such warmth and love from the community and yourself, and would often say that he's met his true family. I thank everyone here. He has been in a dark place, and you helped raise him from that place. He is a proud void walker. You are a wonderful soul, Joe. We are all hoping that he will pull through. He is in intensive care at the moment. And from the words of Gareth, much love to you, brother.
May 13th.
Hello, Joe. Richard here. Sorry it's taken so long to get back to you. We have been spending days in the hospital. Gareth has been under palliative sedation since last week and has been intubated. He's not really there anymore, and it's breaking our hearts. He had a primary directive of not having any medical interventions. He did not want to be intubated, so we argued with the doctor, but to no avail. He is unconscious. It's just a waiting game now. We hope he comes around or is out of body and flying high in the Astral. Thank you for reaching out.
May 16th, 2024.
Gareth is awake. He came around this morning and is a little drowsy, but he's alive. He was talking about grey aliens from space and worrying some of the nurses, but hopefully he can strengthen and come home for early next week.
I was so stoked to hear that. That's fantastic. And then May 17th. This takes a second. I apologize. I might want to erase this part. Yeah, I'm going to erase this part. I'm going to start crying on the air, man. Like, you guys don't laugh.
I have arisen from the dead. Hello, my friend Gareth here. I have been unconscious for about a week. I don't remember anything until I started to come back into existence. It was weird. I was in the ether having a heated exchange with grey aliens. I felt like a proper hard ass. I was not happy with them, telling them that I knew what their plans were and that I was about to kick their ass. They were somewhat confused as to how they should deal with me. One of them pushed me, and then I just suddenly woke up. Gareth Williams. I'm in the hospital until next week, currently under observation. I felt free when I was talking in the ether. Kinda sucks being back. Anyway, feels like I've been asleep for 5 minutes and not a whole week. I've missed you, brother. I hope you're well. My nurse is currently changing my clothes. I have some bed sores from being in the same position for so long. Speak soon, buddy. Much love to you and the community.
Man, I was so happy when I got that message. But then again, it's like, whoa, man, what? So we're going to get into a series tonight talking about conscious projections, but I want to finish this part here. I have to share this with y'all. I'm glad he's back.
Me too. Yeah, I don't remember anything. It was only as I was coming back into consciousness that I had this encounter. It was probably the neurons in the brain refiring after being dead for a while. LOL, I have a lot of your videos to catch up on. Can't wait to listen to them.
All right. So there's Gareth there. I'll try to give you guys a little bit more of our conversations because a lot of times he talks about the community too, you know? So I wanted to get into Vuldoon. I was going to get into some Monroe projections tonight, but for some reason, archive.org, which is, I've never seen this happen on the internet. It's kind of worrying me a little bit. But archive.org is down. Unless you guys can get it up. I can't get to it. So you guys remember when Sylvan Vuldoon was talking about how conscious projections are rare? So this is the thing when I hear of some people talk about astral projection, like it's something that they do consistently or something that they're proficient at. But here's a guy that was in the 20s, Sylvan Vuldoon, talking about, well, yeah, we do project all the time. Hey, Sudi. But conscious projections, being conscious in the astral is rare. Internet Archive is hacked? Great. That sucks. Now, what kind of jerk would do that? So Vuldoon goes on to say, rarely does an astral projector ever experience projections which are completely conscious from beginning to end. And those are the good ones, by the way. Those are the really good ones, actually. He says, I know this to be a fact, not only from my own experience, but by reading the experiences of others. Most accounts of astral projections begin with the subject finding himself in a new body outside his physical body. That is, the person doesn't become conscious until he's already projected some distance from his physical body or outside of cord activity range. Some people claim to understand just how they got there. Others admit that they don't understand the reasons why, but one thing has always puzzled me. If the astral projectors who understand how they did it really do understand the process, then why haven't they made it known? I've understood this process for many years and presumed that all students of the occult understood it more or less. But it wasn't until I began to turn my attention to what others had written upon the subject that I was convinced that the process wasn't generally understood after all. And I'm still convinced of it to this day. And this is 2024. That the entire process of astral projection isn't understood in its whole. It's easy to tell people what happens once the astral body is projected, but telling them how to cause the projection is another matter. Like, it's easy to say, I will not reveal the process of actually separating the bodies, which is what people will say when they talk about their stories. And a lot of adepts of this phase do, under the claim that it would be giving, quote, dangerous information, which would lead to disastrous consequences. But I've figured out that the reason why none of these, quote, sages have given the detailed process of projection isn't because they are concerned as to the dangers involved, but because they don't know. Right. They know that certain practices will ensure astral projection of the body, but they don't know why these practices produced the desired result. They know that they have awakened outside the physical body, but not knowing why, they have pronounced it a gift or said that it was spontaneous. And the fact that most tales of conscious astral projection begin after the astral body has left the physical points with certainty to the conclusion that an entirely conscious projection from beginning to end is very rare. And a completely conscious projection is rare too. I believe I've said this before, that in most instances, consciousness only comes after one is already projected. In most instances. Here's where I'm going to disagree with Vuldoon on this, though. Yes, it's hard to, like, once you get to the vibratory state, to peel yourself out. Yeah, it's hard. It's difficult. But you have to experience that. It's really cool to project yourself. You know, you're doing the exercises or whatever, and then the next thing you know, you're outside your physical body somewhere. No, that's cool. Don't get me wrong. It's really cool. But nothing is cooler than the peel out method, being conscious from the moment you go from the vibratory state into the peel out, into getting out of your body, moving around, doing whatever you do, and then coming back to your body. And the entire time that you did it was conscious. It is the coolest, most sublime experience you'll ever have. Now, here's what Vuldoon says, though. Now, however, I've produced such a projection, conscious from the very beginning, several times, and have experienced unintentional projections of this type on several other times or occasions. And now you'll remember that my very first projection was conscious from the outset. Whenever a projection of this type took place, I always noticed it did so after I had been sleeping for several hours. I would awaken between 1 and 4 o'clock in the morning, which is the witching hour, or that witching period. And usually the astral body would begin to rise as I entered sleep again. But on the other occasions, as in the first experience quoted, the projection would begin in the hypnagogic state when emerging from sleep. So now I'm going to tell you what takes place in each of these stages. The hypnagogic state, emerging from sleep, and 2, the hypnagogic state when going to sleep. These are my favorite. These are my favorite too, by the way. Melody. Is that what it was? Was it just a group of people that were just practicing their hacking skills and decided they wanted to take down Internet Archive? I love Internet Archive. That sucks. All right. So the first experience quoted is an example of what takes place when a conscious projection occurs in the hypnagogic state following sleep. One begins to awaken slowly after you've slept, unable to understand where they are, but conscious that they do exist somewhere. Close your eyes and seal your ears, and you will have some idea of the condition which one is in just before the takeoff in a projection. Now, consciousness grows slightly stronger, and one understands that, hey, I'm lying in bed before he can see or hear, and there will be a very noticeable pulsation in the back of the head when you awake. This is your heartbeat usually, and often this is the very first thing one does notice, even before he can understand that he's lying upon the bed. Presently, they'll realize that he can't move for a second when you wake up, just for a second. And if they wish to produce the projection, they must have no desire to move physically, but must think of rising into the air. But he cannot try to move up into the air by trying to use effort, for this would interfere with the power which actually moves the body. And at the same time, one merely lies quiet without emotion. That's the ticket right there. No emotion. Just chill. So you lie quiet without emotion and just think of moving upward. You'll start to feel as if you weigh a ton, as if you were glued down to the bed, and eventually you'll start to feel as if this glue holding you down has lost its adhesiveness, and then it feels like you're a balloon. When the anchor is disconnected, you begin to move upwards. Then the floating sensation is present because the astral body really is floating for real. And the subject must lie perfectly calm while this has happened. Stay calm. Enjoy the sensation of floating and think only of moving upward and outward. You'll start to become cataleptic, and as a rule, until after the power has moved him outside cord activity range. But you might become free of catalepsy sometimes after the body has uprighted when within cord activity range. Now I got to tell you guys, this to me is where things get a little dicey, okay? Because this is what's happening to Sylvan Vuldoon. So I think what happens too, I think William Bielman's right about this. When we start developing systems in our head, it'll keep doing those systems. So according to Vuldoon, I guess he was telling himself, well, I'm going to float up out of the body, and then eventually I'm going to float up and out, right? And then the body's going to come upright. Now, that has never happened to me before. I've just peeled myself out of body and just started moving around. But I think what happens, and I'm pretty sure about this, but maybe some of you guys can help me with this, is once we tell ourselves that we have a system, or this is how something works, especially in the astral realm, it continues to keep doing the same thing, you know? And that's okay. I don't care. I just think that believing in something like, well, you're going to do it this way and this exact way, and then you're going to stand upright. And then as long as you're in cord activity range, if you're telling your brain this stuff, and you're giving yourself a formula, you might miss out on something that you could experience. That's all I'm saying. So anyways, he never becomes free from catalepsy while the body is in the horizontal position. He could not and remain horizontal. My cat is tearing something up. Y'all hear it. So all the time within cord activity range, the subject can feel the heart's pulsations in the back of his head, and there will always be present in some form or another the eccentricities which you have studied and which you will manifest within range. Now, once outside the range of cord activity, the phantom is free and is possessed of the most indescribable agility and exhilaration. Did he ever say how far that his quote, like cord activity range actually is? Did he ever say that? Because I felt pretty free from mine just out in the yard. So I don't know. This is where most people who have experienced a conscious projection first gain consciousness. Most of the accounts begin like this. Here's a quote of a story. Once more I found myself outside my body, possessed of a freedom which I could never describe. This is what you'll hear. Is not this the most desirable place to become conscious, where you can feel a freedom that you can't describe? It certainly is. There is nothing undesirable in astral projection, when one can awaken with such an enlivened feeling and be perfectly free. And you guys just heard Gareth talking about it there. What's up, Cosmic? Whether it was a dream or an astral projection, I think it was an astral projection because of the freedom that he felt in the dream. He was like, I didn't want to come back. And unlike most of us, he has to come back to kind of like a broken body, you know. So his sense of freedom is probably way, way bigger than ours, you know. So he goes on to say, well, notice that when a conscious projection begins during the second hypnagogic state, emerging from sleep, the subject will feel the disconnection of the two bodies. But when the projection occurs during the first hypnagogic state, while you're entering sleep, the astral body rises up so easily that the subject scarcely knows that he has moved upward until suddenly he sees this to be the case. I think he's right about that, because that's usually when I do it. When the sense of hearing begins to manifest, the sounds seem far away. When the eyes first begin to see, the astral eyes first begin to see, everything seems blurred and whitish. Just as the sounds become more distinct, so does the sense of sight become clearer and clearer. There is a spot just out of coincidence of the physical and the astral body in which the phantom or the etheric double passes upward through it. The consciousness seems to fade out to some extent, then radiates back to normal again. I wonder if that's the same place that I heard all those voices. Because I remember when I was falling asleep. What's up, Dutchie? That's what it sounded when I heard. So when I was doing those hypnagogic exercises, you'll start to, you'll get to a place where you can try to fight falling asleep. And then it'll get so deep that you can't really fight it. You can feel yourself fighting it, trying to stay awake, but it's almost like it's just pulling you under. You know, like there's no stopping it. You're going down, man. And in that moment, I heard voices like I was in a cafeteria, just people talking everywhere, man. Almost like I was sitting in a massive cafeteria. And then it kind of, you know, it phased in and went out like he's talking about. So maybe that's the same thing. He says, this spot is the place where it is most difficult to hold consciousness. Yeah, it's super tough. And remember, it's very close to coincidence where the etheric double and the physical body reside. It is in the zone of quietude, so to speak. So producing an entirely conscious projection of the astral body is a very delicate and difficult feat. And usually one's attempts will be unsuccessful most of the time, unless his physical body is in the most profound state of incapacity and his emotions are absolutely calm. That's a key, man. You got to flatline, and I call it balance, but it's basically like a feeling of nothingness. That's where you got to be, you know. There can be no subconscious stress. No subconscious stress is necessary in such a case, as the subconscious will takes the suggestion of moving upward directly from the conscious mind. The reason why completely conscious projections only occur as a rule after the subject has been sleeping for several hours is because the physical body has become incapacitated to a greater extent. It's not unusual for people to wake up early in a condition of so-called nocturnal paralysis, which is really a cataleptic condition of the astral body, and this is the opportune time to try to project the astral body, which then becomes merely a matter of proper suggestion and emotional calm. I'd noticed that completely conscious astral projections practically always occurred after I had been sleeping for several hours, sometimes even after I'd slept the entire night, often making their appearance at 6 and 7 o'clock in the morning sometimes. So as a rule, I would suddenly become wide awake, almost always at the same hour, every morning for 6 or 8 mornings regularly. And then would come an awakening at the identical time when I would experience the projection of the astral body. So for about 6 mornings at 2 o'clock, I would suddenly awaken, and then lying awake for about 15 minutes would go back to sleep again. And this would become a morning routine. And then there would come a morning when I would awaken at 2 o'clock and would have an astral projection, sometimes when emerging from sleep and sometimes on going to sleep again. Yeah, all of that sounds right. Doesn't it? I don't have the phone lines open. Let's go to the chats. What do you guys got to say? What's up, Jane? Conscious versus unconscious implies a force which drives such experience. Mysterium maximus. Seems about right, sort of like a direction of focus. Which is why rest after a problem unresolved results in the musing of a solution. Yeah, I agree with that. For sure. Probably why I also take too long to ease into a day. Who wants to get out of bed to address the nonsense of the day? Yeah, I hear that. Are there any plant friends that can make it easier? What? Oh yeah, your Aunt Mary. Okay. I think that messes with everything, actually. I mean, because if you think about it, most people that smoke weed, they're like, I don't dream, you know. Now let's talk about the passive will. The passive will. So we kind of understand what the will is, right? But Vuldoon wants to talk about the passive will. So have you ever had an intense desire to acquire something or just to do something and found that you awakened regularly in the dead of the night with this desire upon your mind and that you couldn't think of anything else? That's actually happening to me right now, And have you ever noticed that after you had experienced this for some time, that what you desired, you often acquire? When you stop to think about this, did it not seem that some influence within you awakened you just for that purpose of allowing you to desire that which you wished? Yeah, he's on to something here. It has always appeared so to me, and I have, on 3 different occasions, acquired things which I have very much wanted, and which in my hours of daily consciousness seemed absolutely beyond my reach. So they seemed unattainable. But you will find, if you analyze this, that you'll be able to conceive of doing or acquiring some of the most seemingly impossible things when you awaken in the dead of the night and think about them. Things which you could never think of doing during your hours of daily thought. Here's an example. Mr. Brown desires a rise in his wages. He has had this desire for some time, but hesitates to ask his employer for more money. So in the dead of the night, Mr. Brown awakens with his mind upon more money. Perfectly conscious, he lies there and tells himself he'll go to his boss and tell him, I'm going to tell my boss, what's up, man? I want a raise, right? Now, he will do this and he will do that. This is what he's telling himself in the dead of the night. But when the next day comes, where did this will go? This determination just suddenly disappeared. He didn't say shit to his boss, right? So when Mr. Brown thinks of the resolutions he made when he's drowsy but conscious during the night before, he wonders how he possibly could have thought of doing such ridiculous things. So the next night, Mr. Brown awakens again, thinking of the same thing. More money. I need a raise. I need more money. And while he lies there, conscious but quiet and drowsy, he again has this strong will which seems almost ridiculous during the day, and his intentions to tell the boss. I'm going to tell him what's up. This time I'm going to tell him. I'm going to demand more money. Seems perfectly sane and reasonable. But still, when the day comes, doesn't happen. Now, all of us have experienced this. We thought up things, planned to do things, determined to acquire something, while awake in the dead of the night, and on the morrow have looked back upon those resolutions as almost too extreme, almost like we were being fanatics, almost carrying our will a bit too far. But if we had the nerve in reality, which we had in our imagination or conscious imagination, wouldn't we be brave? Indeed. So now you have learned that will, that word will, is putting into action, making ourselves do something mentally, centering our attention upon one thing until it crowds all other impressions into the background. So, there is a passive will and there is an active will. The passive will is the stronger, the more determined, and this is the will which we have when we awake in the dead of the night to think about things and plan our castles in the sky, so to speak. We will call this the passive will because we are in a passive condition while we are using it. When we are willing into the night, conscious but drowsy and passive. The will we use during the day, which we're more or less compelled to use, we shall call the active will because we're in an active body and mind. The will we use during the day is the will which looks back upon the resolutions, the contemplations of the passive will the night before, and now thinks of those a bit too extreme. It's almost like having those two voices, except this time one is the will, your passive will on your shoulder that talks to you while you wake up in the middle of the night, and the active will, and this one is like the one that is telling you that guy, that passive will on this shoulder is too crazy, too extreme. It's not practical. Okay. The The passive will is the imaginative will, but is determined and extreme in its willing. Nevertheless, the subject is firmly convinced, while the passive will is functioning, that its premises are reasonable. Just another example now is to show you the difference between the passive will and the active will, for all this is important in producing the astral projection, as we shall see. I remember that when I was a small boy, Vuldoon goes on to say, my older brother had a 10-gauge shotgun. I'd always wanted to be able to tell my friends that I had shot off that gun and how it backfired. Backfired? You mean how it kicked? Because 10 gauges kick pretty hard. A boy next door one day told me that if I shot off the gun, the recoil would knock me over and dared me to try it. I wanted to pretend that I was capable of handling a gun, but within me I was terribly afraid that if I did try to discharge it, I would get knocked over. Several nights, I awakened thinking of shooting that big gun, and as I lay thinking about it, I would resolve to do the deed in bed. I could see myself doing it, see my friend next door looking on with envy as I shot this gun, as I shot off that 10 gauge perfectly. And when I thought of it, and many times I said, I'm going to shoot it. But when the next day came and I looked at the gun, the resolutions of my passive will, my imaginative will, all my determination, which seemed so reasonable the night before, would seem preposterous and even fantastic. Now, if I but had the same determined will, the same extreme will, while active, which I had while passive, there would have been no hesitancy upon my part in shooting that gun. Of course, the active will and the passive will may be said to merge into one another, but for my present purpose, we shall consider that there is a distinctly passive will and an imaginative will, and that there is a distinctly active will, both conscious. Now, you're going to understand, of course, that the passive will is by no means confined to manifesting itself during periods of wakefulness during the night, for the imaginative will can function at any time while we are conscious. The active will and the passive will can function simultaneously. That is, one can be performing an action dictated by the active will, and at the same time, the passive will can be willing something else. That's us being like half in and half out. 10 o'clock. Okay. All right. So now, how do we induce projection, astral projection, by understanding the passive will? And that, my friends, coming up next after we take the Fringe FM radio break. We got to pay the bills, pay for the licensing for the music. I think I'm smelling what he's stepping in. I think I know what we're getting into here, but we'll see. Grab a drink. We only got a few minutes. Stay with us.
this is country music singer and void walker Jason Benoit, and when I need my fix on the world of magic and the capabilities of the human consciousness, I listen to Joe Roop right here on Lighting the Void Radio.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app. Free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when it happened. There was a sudden jolt and a submarine crashed on the seafloor. We were in total darkness.
That's Dr. Dejana Figueroa, a marine biologist and STEM teacher, talking about a deep sea dive she'll never forget.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I was afraid of the ocean, and there I was, 2 miles below the surface. But as a scientist, you prepare for that. Using our training and a little creativity, we fixed the sub and finished our experiments. The dive was just too important. Every dive gives us glimpses at things few people ever get to see. Glowing creatures, fiery undersea volcanoes. When we got back to the surface, I kissed the ground and called my mom, of course. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that dive for anything.
Dr. Figueroa uses her passion for STEM to discover new things and make the world a better place. She can STEM, so can you. Check out She Can STEM for more stories and inspiration. A message from the Ad Council.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Have you ever wondered, what do the stars say for me? Or, will the next month or the next year be more favorable? How about, are our two signs compatible? Each month, at the new moon, you can ask these questions live with me, your astrologer psychic, Mary DeCina, along with host of Lighting the Void, Joe Root. Join us at the new moon for Cosmic Conditions. We look forward to working with your energy.
Every new moon at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on Fringe FM.
Hey, this is No Way Jose, a Northern California Piscean stuck in the Arizona desert. I'm a void walker, and I got the shoes to prove it. So what do I do when my soul yearns to delve deep into the realm of the unknown? I aim my satellite straight into the night sky and catch a smooth ride on the KTLK-DB radio waves. I tune into Lighting the Void with Joe Root on the Fringe FM.
Joe, Lighting the Void is the best show on the planet. This is Barney, your friend from Facebook. Thank you and all the crew for all you do. Namaste, my friend.
This is Macon from the foothills of North Carolina, and I am a void walker.
G'day, void walkers. This is Lily from down under Australia. The world may be small, the enigma is greater. So let your curiosity take you for a journey with Joe Root.
Hey, this is Fee, coming in from Central Maryland, and I am a void walker.
This is Kevin Doherty, a beginner void walker. I'm from Vancouver, BC. I know a little about a lot, and as Leonard Skinner said, I'll guess the rest. I learned a lot from Mr. Root in the show, and heard it from the beginning. I knew right then he was going to be a new art gal. Thanks for all your shows, and keep it up.
Hey, this is Derek from Mass, aka the Night Stalker, and I'm a void walker.
This is Mark from Chicago, and I walk the void to ascertain what is consciousness.
My name is Jared Johnson, and I'm from Humboldt County, California. I do not know all the answers to the questions about reality. I do not claim to know the ultimate truth about life. I seek that which has been made hidden as a part of a family of explorers of consciousness. I'm a void walker. Thanks, Joe Root.
Now, broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now here's your host, Joe Rue.
Alex Exum. By the way, Alex is a co-host on the Fringe FM podcast. I'm hoping I get that thing done tomorrow, but we should have that episode, the first episode of Fringe FM done by the end of the week. And the first episode is a whole crew extravaganza about the out-of-body experience. So, and then the next one is going to be about Halloween. I guess we're going to do a Halloween show. I just want to listen to music all night, you know? What's up, Dan? I gotta get back into that. Man, if I wasn't so damn tired, I gotta get back into that Monday night music broadcast. They took down my videos that I did last week with Nancy Trivolato. I even put it in private, tried to edit it, you know, to see if we could keep it up. Won't happen. They won't let us do it. Yeah. All right. So, inducing projection by the passive will method. Remember, if you're just tuning in, we're going through Sylvan Vuldoon's book that was written in the 20s. This guy was like the Robert Monroe of the 20s, and he just got through talking about the passive and active will. Recap. Passive will is the thing that we think of, that we desire, those things that we think about when we wake up in the middle of the night, right? None of my business what that is, by the way, but that's the passive will. And then when we get into reality, we don't actually do those things because they seem ridiculous when we get into reality, when we're awake. The things that we do while we're awake is the active will. Now, what he's going to talk about is inducing projection by the passive will. This is another method. So when we're daydreaming, we're often using the passive will. We can be imagining but not willing. We can will without being an imaginative too. But when we are imagining to extremes, when we awaken in the dead of the night and think of performing some act which during the day seemed preposterous, and the act seemed at the time perfectly reasonable when we're asleep. I don't drink. I've never woke up in the middle of the night and it's like, man, I'm really going to ask for that raise tomorrow. That's never been my thing. My thing's been more like deep stuff. But he's right. Like when it comes time to do them during the day, most of the time we don't do them because they seem kind of crazy. But so we can imagine things but not will them. We can will things without being imaginative. But when we are imagining to extremes, when we awaken in the dead of the night and think of performing some act which during the day seemed preposterous, and the act seems at the time perfectly reasonable, when you say, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that to your imaginings, then you're putting super powerful impressions, actually, I don't know if you know this or not, but you're putting super powerful impressions into your subconscious mind. Alex, I'm live on the air, brother. This guy is such a narcissist. He doesn't even know I do a show.
You know me, man. I have inspirations, and I'm like, I gotta call Joe and talk to him right now.
What's your inspiration? I mean, you're live on the air.
About a show, but if we're live on the air, I don't want to mention it until I talk to you offline, because I don't know if you actually want to talk about it. But we'll
Are you going to be up?
Discuss it.
Are you going to be up in 45 minutes?
What time do you get off at another 9 o'clock? Right, you'll be off.
Yeah.
Yeah, give me a jingle then. I'm going to tune in. I forgot you're on air. Sorry, brother.
Bye-bye. Those are my friends, man. Even you guys know I do a show right now, you know. All right. Where was I? So, when you're serious in your suggestions, what kind of dummy? Am I a dummy for even answering that? When you are serious in your suggestions as to what you will do, and then the act which you intend doing is extreme, the impressions made upon the subconscious mind is actually very powerful. It's kind of the same thing when you do magic and stuff like that. So remember that the subconscious mind takes these suggestions seriously, regardless of the source, wherever they came from. And if you use your passive will upon that which you desire, the imaginative will, the extreme will, the determined will, the subconscious mind receives determined extreme suggestions which it could not possibly receive from the active will. So let me try to simplify this, okay? Because he has a way of like complicating stuff in this book, you know. Now, how many times, you can raise your hand in the chat if you want. How many times have you thought about something? You woke up in the middle of the night and you were thinking about something. And before you say sex, let's just take that one off the table. I know some of you are thinking it because I thought it. But let's just say you woke up thinking about something else, right? Well, it could be a raise at work, or it could be getting in shape. It could be something crazy like, man, I really want that car. Just something, anything that you woke up thinking about. Anything. How many times have you ever had that thing where that thing that you're impressing upon your subconscious mind while you're sleeping actually comes to pass? And sometimes it'll come to pass easier and in a coincidence kind of form, more than it is for the stuff that we actually go out and try to do repetitively. It's very weird. And this is how powerful the subconscious mind is. Now, perhaps you're going to say, well, what are you trying to make us believe? That one can project merely by imagining that you can astral project? How does this work with astral projection? Not manifesting stuff into the earth, but how does this work with astral projection? So, in one sense, the idea that you can project merely by imagining the idea of astral projection, this is actually truer than you might think. But I'm not advancing the claim that imagination alone can project the astral body. I am advancing the claim that the passive will, or the imaginative will, can cause the projection of the astral body. Now, since the subconscious mind accepts all suggestions without reasoning, doesn't matter. It takes in everything, remember? The suggestions which it receives from the passive will, the extreme will, are accepted without reserve. That's how your subconscious works. Whatever you impress upon it, it doesn't have a thing that goes, well, is that real or is that reasonable? No. It just takes it all in, right? So, let us go back to that fellow, Mr. Brown, that we talked about earlier, who wants more money from his employer. Under the influence of the passive will, remember, he was waking up in the middle of the night going, I'm going to ask my boss for more money. So, under the influence of the passive will, Mr. Brown lies awake in the dead of the night, thinking about his desire. He visualizes, imagines, sees himself going up to his employer and demanding higher wages. And all the time under this imaginative will, Mr. Brown sees this as a reasonable thing during that time in the middle of the night, and even says, I'm going to do this. I'm going to tell my boss what's up, really in earnest for the time being. Now, his subconscious mind is influenced by this, and the stress of the extreme determination is a powerful thing that impresses upon the subconscious mind. So now, if Mr. Brown were to continue to use his extreme will, he would do the things he imagined that he would do. No shit. The subconscious mind, which receives the suggestions, continues to hold them in that light. And if Brown's conscious mind were to exit for a time, the subconscious would still hold the stress of those passive willings. I hope I'm making sense here. It makes sense to me. I hope I'm making sense to you. So now, that is the principle under which you work to produce projection of the astral body. But what he doesn't say, what Vuldoon doesn't say here, because you can tell he's studying the occult while he's explaining this stuff, right? What Vuldoon doesn't say is that works in manifesting things too. So you don't have to draw circles and do chants and stuff. You could actually just wake up in the middle of the night. Whatever you're desiring, it's buried in you anyways. You're going to be thinking about it. your dream body. It's funny how your dreams know exactly what you want, even things where you're like, man, I don't know if I want that, but you kind of do. You have those desires, you know. So now that this is the principle under which you work to produce projection of the astral body via awakening in the night under the passive will to project and going to sleep again with these extreme determined willings still centered in your mind. So he's told us how he used to wake at 2 o'clock every morning for a whole bunch of mornings just before he did a conscious astral projection. And every time he says, I awakened, it seemed to me that some power within me had purposely awakened me. Something inside him is like, awaken, Mr. Vuldoon. So that I would think about the desire. And I would think about and desire the projection of the astral body. I would imagine seemingly impossible things concerning projection. And yet, in that state of passivity, they did not seem at all unattainable. And I often said to myself, hey, I'm going to project fully conscious from the start. I've done it unintentionally, and I can do it again. I will go to such and such a place when I project. I don't know, Fiji. Allowing my imagination all the time to be accepted as perfectly reasonable in the moment. Yet, by day, when I woke up and started living my day, quote, real life, right? I confessed that I would modify my will a little, and I would think that I might project fully conscious from the start, and that I might appear at such and such a place, maybe. And even though I had done so before, I doubted that I could intentionally do it again. Thus, it eventually dawned upon me that the passive will, the imaginative will, was stronger. It was the stronger will after all, and that those serious and extreme imaginations, which seemed reasonable at the time, actually would take root in my subconscious just as forcibly as my passive will had impressed them upon it, and it was thus the first conscious astral projections were brought about. Now, I had noticed the fact that I awakened at about 2 o'clock every morning, morning after morning, for many days prior to a conscious projection, and that during the waking period, I would then I would think of nothing but astral projection. The real cause of the completely conscious projection did not occur to me for several years after. I now know that it was during these periods of nocturnal wakefulness that I was using the passive will, or, he likes to use big words here, hyper-dynamizing the desire for projection, which was already in my mind. Yes, the desire was already there. It was dynamized by my knowledge of and desire for projection, and the stress of the desire would awaken me in the night, and then I would be using the passive will upon the very stress which awakened me, thus hyperdynamizing it, and later causing conscious projection from the beginning, and the complete conscious projection began at the hour at which I had been awakened each night. Whoa, that's a lot. So this is the way. You ever hear people talk about enhance your psychic powers, increase your psychic abilities? Well, do you want to know the one thing that stops you from having those abilities, or that cuts them off, is your doubt. So it's your doubt. Your doubt. As soon as you start doubting things, right? So while you're asleep, you're perfectly calm. You're not in your emotions. You're not thinking of things. And most of the time when a thought comes into our mind while we're going about our day, if it seems too good to be true, that's the first thing that, it's too good to be true. That can't be real. I can't do that. That's not practical, blah, blah, blah. Every doubt in the world comes in. And it comes in so fast. 1 million doubts come in before you can even get to that one thing that you desired, that you thought that you could have. It's the same thing with intuition. When someone comes into us and impresses upon us or asks us a question, we could psychically tap into people if we wanted to. You know, usually it's kind of like our first intuitive thought. You have to really pay attention because you'll have a first impression or intuition upon something. And then after that, all the doubt stuff will come in and just pepper it. And then I don't know. That's what we tell ourselves. I don't know. Maybe find somebody else that knows, or I don't know. It's the same thing when you're asleep and you have this passive will. You wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, I deserve more money. I'm going to tell my boss, like, I deserve more money. And at the time, it seems reasonable. But as you start to wake up, you're not in hypnagogic, that sleep state, deep in your subconscious, right? You start to wake up and you're back in everyday life, and there's your boss for real. Now you have all these doubts pepper in your mind, all these different thoughts. But if you could just let that go, if you could stay calm, what might happen is you might not even have to talk to him. It might just manifest. That's a whole other side of the occult, right? But he's taken that same premise and talking about how we can project the astral body using this understanding, right? And as a matter of fact, when the stress, remember I'm talking about stresses of desires. So when the stress of a desire is so strong enough to awaken you at night, it's already there. It's strong enough to project you into the astral body without hyperdynamizing it by the passive will. But to awaken each night successively and use the passive will upon the stress, the desire actually does hyperdynamize the stress, and it will become so strong that you then can produce a projection conscious from the very beginning, and sometimes when emerging from sleep, and sometimes when going to sleep again. The stress of the mind will do one of three things when it becomes strong. It will awaken the subject. It will cause him to somnambulate physically, or it will project the astral body. And if the stress awakens you in the night, you can take advantage of this to use your passive will upon it, and thus make it stronger, more dynamic than ever. And sometime or another at night will come when consciousness does not appear on time, and the subconscious will be in the act of moving the astral body when consciousness does not appear. Perhaps it's just on the verge of moving the astral body, and perhaps the body is already projected some distance. I do not hesitate, he goes on to say, to declare that the passive will to project, imaginative will to project, so to speak, the astral body is one of the biggest secrets of astral projecting or projection. You can call it a process of mere imagination if you want to, but it is not mere imagination. It is imagination plus will to do that which is imagined. You can never force the passive will successfully. For the instant you try to force it, it becomes active. You must just have the desire to project so strongly inside you, within your own being, that it produces a passive will, which in turn builds up the stress of the desire and convinces the subconscious mind that the visions you imagine concerning projection are perfectly reasonable and possible. And by day, perhaps under active will, you may think of projecting yourself, but will have your doubts. Remember, I just talked about that. You'll have your doubts as to whether you can even do it. But at night, you can awaken and imagine yourself projecting and have faith that you can do it, just as I had faith at night. And I could discharge that shotgun that I talked about, but had my doubts during the day. And when under active will, I didn't think I could do it. Now that determined, that extreme will, which we have when awakening in the dead of the night, conscious but drowsy, is the will which promotes the projection of the astral body. Use this to obtain results. Try to awaken at a certain hour, let's say 3 o'clock every morning. And if your desire for projection be sufficiently strong, your imaginative will dwell upon that desire. Use no effort of will. Just allow it. Allow the will and the imagination concerned in projection to take their course and then fall to sleep again during the process. Do this for several nights in succession, and soon strange things will begin to happen about this hour in the morning. We can go over this step by step if you like. Now, if you believe that you have in your mind sufficiently dynamized with the desire to project, and if your belief is correct, one of the following things are going to happen. Number one, you should dream of a projection of the astral body. So if you've built this desire up in your body or in your being, eventually you're going to have a dream that you've astrally projected. 2, You should somnambulate physically. One of the indications is to awaken and find yourself just getting out of bed. So you almost sleepwalk, so to speak. 3, you should awaken in the night with a desire upon your mind. As soon as you wake up, you're thinking about it. 4, you should experience an actual conscious astral projection. Now, if none of these manifestations occur, there is but one explanation. Either you only imagined that your mind was dynamized with a desire, or else you are experiencing unconscious astral projections. And let me tell you this, unconscious astral projection is a common occurrence. I believe that no one has any idea of how really common unconscious astral projection is. It is my firm belief that for every case of physical somnambulism, there are a dozen astral projections of the unconscious type. I've experienced many conscious astral projections, and I have no idea how many times I have been unconsciously projected, yet I have, so far as I know, only experienced 2 or 3 physical somnambulisms in my life. And as to the 4 different results which dynamization of the desire to project in the astral body should produce, first, you should dream of the projection of the astral body and at once try one of the methods for causing it to awaken when you reach a certain place. And second, if you somnambulate physically, you have not yet induced the proper degree of incapacity of the physical body. Yeah, your body shouldn't be moving around. It should be in bed. So you must reduce the heartbeat a little more. And then when the subconscious will decides to project the body, the physical body will not respond instantly and will be left behind. And third, should you awaken in the dead of the night with a desire in your mind, exert your passive will upon this desire, your imaginative will, and rise to sleep under the influence of this imaginative will. Also be sure that you induce complete bodily passivity before going to sleep so that you may awaken an astral catalepsy. And fourth, should you find that none of the first 3 occurrences take place, you have either a lack of desire, stress, or are undergoing unconscious astral projections. In this case, suggest to yourself, as you're going to sleep, that you will henceforth awaken at 3 o'clock every morning. If this does not awaken you, use an alarm clock until you can form the habit of awakening at the proper time. Lie awake in the silence of the night, conscious but drowsy, and allow your passive will to work upon the desire to project. Continue this night after night until the habit of doing so is established. Then on retiring at night, induce greater bodily passivity by slowing down the speed of the heart. And you guys know how to do that, right? You can actually do the 4-fold breath, really relax and slow your breathing down until your heart slows down, and then actually just kind of, you can imagine that it's slowing down as you're doing this too. In fact, the more relaxed you get, the slower your heart rate's going to get. What is the question here? Sudi's asking, I can't find any information anywhere about what happens after our astral body dies, and it is bothering me. Well, who says your astral body dies to begin with? How come more people on the astral aren't exploring it, talking about it like we are here? It almost seems to me that people go into the astral, then act like that's it. As in, I have only heard one person briefly mention the death of the astral body. But you think that if there's a next phase after that, people in the astral would be wondering, preparing, or talking about it. Maybe. I don't know. I would say in all 3 of Robert Monroe's books and William Buellman's book, the astral body doesn't die. It just morphs into something else. So, for instance, if you really want to talk about that William Buellman and Robert Monroe, but I would read William Buellman's books on this one, because eventually his body that has arms and legs and his physical etheric form that he thinks that he has, eventually goes on and starts to morph into something else and then into something else. And at the end of the day, he realized that he was just a ball of light that belongs in the universe somewhere. And that ball of light actually comes together with everything else at some point. It's a good question, actually, because I think one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people don't talk about that is because we have a hard enough time exploring this realm first. We're not even consciously ready, for the most part, to explore this part of ourselves. And a lot of people don't even think this part of this astral part of us is real. So you can bet that once society gets to this place where they realize, oh, we have like this etheric double, not like a tenth of society. It's going to have to be more than that. Then they'll start thinking, well, where do we go next? What's after that? There's a lot of I don't want to say occult, but spiritual literature that talks about the second death. That the idea is to become so aware that the astral body doesn't die. And astral, remember, means star. That the star body doesn't die. That energy that we don't understand doesn't die, reincarnate, and kind of like what's called the second death, where we don't even remember our identities anymore on an individual level. So imagine you're an individual star of consciousness you break yourself down and you go into this earth plane and you forget everything. You're in the deepest earth, where we are now, according to the occultists, is the deepest dream state you can be in, the densest dream state. Of fallen, like you fell from stars, like the stars into this place. And to go back, it takes you to be aware, not only in your physical body, but be totally aware in your etheric body. And then from there, be totally aware, which things start getting pretty elusive in the astral realm. And then be totally aware in the astral to the point where you realize where you actually came from, you know. Thanks for subbing, Michael. William Buellman definitely talks about this in his books if you've read them. Robert Monroe definitely talks about this in his books if you've read all three. And when I say read, I'm not coming from some self-righteous place. I haven't read those books. I listened to them in audio form. So, no death in the astral, Sudi. Well, there are instances, and I'll just give you some examples. I don't want to freak people out, but there are instances of stories of both Monroe, Buellman, and even people that we've had on this show talk about that they've came across people that have passed on into the astral realm. They weren't really aware that they were dead, so they were kind of unconscious in a sense. And that they would just dissipate. Maybe that's what Sudi's talking about. They would just dissipate into the, like Preston Dennett came on the show one time. Said he helped some girl in the astral realm and was helping her go up to the light, so to speak. And eventually she just dissipated and disappeared into the light. The same thing with Monroe and a couple other people. They've helped other people say, hey, man, you're dead. You don't even know you're dead. They finally realize they die, and then they just dissipate somewhere. So it's either the separateness of those two beings separate and they appear to die or dissipate, or who knows, maybe they do. But if you follow Monroe's story and William Buellman's story individually and just follow their stories, it seems like this whole idea that every man and woman is, quote, a star is kind of a real thing. All three books. The first book's fascinating, very scientific, very awakening. But all three books, go through all three if you can. I listen to him. I'm even listening to him now. Okay. Let's go back into Vuldoon. There's still another method. Oh, dude, I thought that was my coffee I just spilled. I made my heart speed up just a tad, but it wasn't. There's still another method which I have found to be good, very good in fact, and probably the most pleasant experience I ever had was obtained by this method. My mind being dynamized with a desire to project. I would awaken at 2 o'clock in the morning, and while lying awake, conscious but drowsy, I would think of projecting and of waking in the room of one of my friends. Some distance from my house, actually. I would lie there, passive, my imaginative will working upon this desire, and finally going to sleep with this in mind, and it worked. I had only repeated this process about 1 week when I awoke in her. I knew it was a girl. When I awoke in her or my friend's room instead of in my physical body. She was at the time asleep, and after standing there watching her for a while, I departed. You may say, well, why didn't you try to awaken her while you were there? But I, in turn, would ask you this. What good would it have done to try the same old experiment of making contact with things in the physical? I have tried it so many times without success, and with that in mind, it seems but a waste of time, when there are so many other things to see and experience while one has the chance to do so. I'd often told my friend about projection of the astral body and explained it to her, but although she would listen, she always had her doubts. And after I discovered this relatively easy method of projecting the astral body to her side, I hit upon a plan which I hoped would get results and convince her that I really could project my astral body. I wanted very much to convince her and cared not whether anyone else believed me or not. But he did care if she believed him. Oh, this is going to get cool. See, this is where things get confusing, because maybe Robert Monroe and I are the only ones that have done this, but according to Monroe, you can affect people in the physical if you're in the second state, what he calls the second body, which I think when he says in his books, the second body, that's the etheric double. So you can affect the physical realm in that body. And yet here's Vuldoon saying, I've tried it so many times and it doesn't work. Well, did you try pinching somebody? You can try talking to somebody in the physical. Hell, I did. I talked to my dad while he was asleep, and he talked back. But the thing is like, he was unconscious. He don't remember talking to me. Or maybe my mind made up that whole conversation while I was there in front of him. I don't know. All I know is that talking to people in the astral, to the physical, so to speak, especially if they're asleep or something, they're not going to remember it. But you can pinch them. That's what Monroe did. He pinched the lady and she felt it. So anyways, he's going to try this plan with this girl. So we agreed upon this plan. Both of us were to awaken at 2 o'clock and lie awake, conscious but drowsy. That's a cool friend, actually. I was to think of projecting myself into her room, and she was to visualize me doing so. And now I hoped by this method to use not only my own powers of projection, but also to utilize her psychic force to assist me. We were to allow our passive wills to work upon our desires, and in the dead of the night, at the same time, it should work. Now, several weeks had passed, and during this time, I succeeded in projecting myself into her room several times and becoming conscious when I was there. But I had no recollection of having traveled the intervening distance. In other words, I don't remember going. I didn't see anything in between or remember it. I remained unconscious until the time when I awakened. And on one occasion when I awakened, she was awake too, but didn't see me. A weirder thing happened, however. I decided on the next occasion to do certain things which I would not tell her, and see if she could describe to me what I did, provided she admitted seeing me. So I went over to her dresser, put my hand upon her hairbrush, walked over to her and put my hand upon her shoulder, stood there for a few moments, then went back and placed my hand upon the hairbrush, then back to her again, etc., repeating this about a dozen times. All the same time, she was apparently sleeping. The next day I asked if she had seen me in her room. No, was the reply, but I dreamed that you were there. What did you dream? I asked her. She said, I dreamed that you were trying to brush my hair. she replied, and that you kept running back and forth trying to find the comb, and that I kept telling you it was on the dresser. Whoa, that's trippy. I concluded this was almost a complete success, even though she was dreaming. However, attempts on her part to see me seemed to be unsuccessful. So what do you suppose happened? I had a dream of being in her room, evidently a partially conscious projection, as I did not recall having had the dream until the next day when I met her, and she stated that she had seen me there. Nothing would convince her that she had not seen me. Of course, the theory of, quote, thought forms might be advanced to account for this, but then it is no greater miracle for the astral body to be at a spot than for a thought form to be created and seen. If the astral phantom can project by night and influence the thoughts of others at a distance, is it not possible that many persons may have committed crimes as the result of some criminal phantom hovering near them while they slept and influencing their minds to commit a crime? Is that possible? Dude, that is such a trippy thought. Okay. We got to talk about this for a second. So, he had an astral projection where he went to her room. Let's recap this for a second. He puts his hand upon the brush, puts his hand upon her shoulder, back on the brush, back on the shoulder. He's conscious. He's in a conscious astral projection while he's doing this. Now, she doesn't remember him being there astrally, but she does have a dream that he's trying to brush her hair and that he's running back and forth from the dresser to our bedside trying to find a comb. What happened here? Obviously, they were connected. Some of the energy and the movements from dream to whatever states they were in were connected. The interpretations were different, but they were connected. That is about as good as it gets so far until things get a bit more specific, until we figure this out. So this is almost like the same thing when Robert Monroe traveled to his neighbor's house, and he said that she was handing out the mail. He saw his neighbor passing out the mail at the table. That's what his mind saw. But when he asked her the next day what she was actually doing, that she was, or not mail, I'm sorry. What his mind saw was that she was handing out playing cards at the table, which didn't make sense to him. Why is she handing out playing cards? Whatever. But when he asked her the next day, what's kind of like your morning routine? She says, well, I go to the table and I hand out the mail. So his mind, when he astrally projected, he actually took his consciousness, moved it to where they were and what they were actually doing. His mind interpreted that it was playing cards on the table. But in the physical earth sphere of this reality, whatever this is, it was the mail. It kind of makes you wonder, like, maybe we're all connected to begin with. So if we took away, let's just take away this, all right? I'm trying to think of how to explain this. Let's take away the 5 senses of the physical body, and we have only thought. We can see things in our mind, we can visualize them, concepts, whatever. Our minds still work, but what we don't have is anything else. This is where, just bear with me. We don't have sound, touch, smell. We can't see anything. We can see them with our mind's eye, but not our physical eye. Now, let's say we existed in a realm where we all are kind of we have all these individuated fractal pieces of consciousness that can do that without physical bodies. That would make sense. Now, first, okay, so you take this. I'm trying to explain this. How do I explain this? So you take those individuated pieces of consciousness and put them in a physical body. The physical plane is just a sensory place. It's a place to take in senses, vision, sound, touch, pain, whatever. But what's really connected still, and was originally connected to begin with, was the neural network of consciousness. So our minds are already connected to begin with. So when we say, well, I'm astrally traveling to this place, are we really taking some type of etheric double to that place? Or are we tapping into that place that was connected before to begin with? And we're just kind of sensing or taking in, like a computer would, what they're sensing or taking in, and we're interpreting it kind of like AI would with a prompt. You know, if you put stuff into a prompt, it comes out a certain way. That's what it sounds like to me. Two people having two things, they astrally project. There's a weird prompt or something, so they're not totally exact, but they're close enough to where you can tell that they're connected. I hope I probably just confused things even more. See, the thing is he was projecting and she was dreaming. So then he asked this question. Now, if we were connected in that sense, if by me going back and forth from the dresser to her shoulder, touching the brush in her arm, if that's true, if thought forms are real, if the astral phantom can project by night and influence the thoughts of others at a distance, is it not possible that many persons may have committed crimes as the result of some criminal phantom hovering near them while they slept and influencing their minds to commit a crime? Is that possible? And he says, it's certainly possible. The idea that dreams are all caused by events met with in prior states of consciousness, everyday life, which are recorded in the subconscious mind, is pure fallacy. Phantoms of the dead and of the living, thoughts of the dead and of the living can bring about dreams, and also influence the minds of individuals, the latter being quite unaware of the fact. And here's another point. Suppose one should project in their astral body by night and enter a house belonging to somebody else, and that someone residing in that house sees them. They see the astral body or the phantom. Do you suppose that you could induce the ordinary individual to believe that the phantom, thus projected, was of an earthly living person like himself, who was but sleeping somewhere? Would you say, oh, if someone saw like a ghost just sitting in front of them, would you be able to say, no, that's just somebody asleep somewhere else? Hardly, right? No, you're not going to convince them of that. And if the projected phantom were unconscious, say the person that was astral projecting, moving around, wasn't conscious of it, because that happens too, so we don't remember it, and then someone saw them, the seer would say that the, quote, spirit that they saw walked right past them without paying any attention to them being there. Thus, there are many ways of accounting for haunted houses and these types of phenomena. This happens. And further, if the projected phantom were unconscious, why might it not be influenced by the thoughts of those that are residing in the house, and to do the things that all of these individuals conceive it doing? Might not telepathy exercise a control over the phantom's mind? Now, I think that's probable. For example, while I was dreaming of being in my friend's room at the time, she saw me there. She saw me. But might not her mind have instigated the dream which I had of being there? In any case, that is what happened on that occasion. And she stated that I came into the room through the wall just as she was about to go to sleep, and that I paid no attention to her as I walked about the room, finally passing out through the wall again. And as time passed, with the cares and duties of everyday existence, our experimenting dropped into insignificance. But since then, I have awakened several times in her room by using the passive will, the imaginative will to do so, and other times during unintentional projections. So why not try this experiment? Therefore, if there are no reasons why you cannot try it, why not try it? Arrange with someone of whom you are fond, a friend, and who, in turn, is affectionately disposed towards you. Make sure you like each other. Both should awaken at a given hour in the night, and lying awake, conscious but drowsy, allow your conscious passive wills to operate upon a desire. The one who is to project must desire to be at the side of the seer. They must visualize himself moving upward out of the physical and speeding through the air to the seer's side, and the seer must imagine the projector doing so at the same time. But do not forget to use your passive wills that we discussed in the previous chapter, your imaginative will. Go to sleep using this passive will. The greater the affection you have towards this person which exists between the projector and the seer, the greater the harmony and the greater will be the desire. And as a mere experiment, someday when you are away from someone you love on going to bed at night, use your imagination. Use your imaginative will and desire to come back to him or her, visualizing yourself moving upward out of the physical body as you're entering sleep. Another factor which will aid in this experiment is that the astral body usually is under the inclination to move back to the place where it is in the habit of residing, and also moves with much more ease from a strange place to a familiar place. I have taken the following accounts, which are similar to those which I have just given from Carrington's True Ghost Stories. Now, here's a case of this nature experienced by an English investigator, the Reverend William Stain Moses, who corroborates the following account, which is furnished by the agent. So one evening I resolved to appear to Z at some distance. I had not informed him beforehand of the intended experiment, but retired to rest shortly after midnight, my thoughts intently fixed upon Z, with whose rooms and surroundings I was quite unacquainted, and I soon fell asleep and woke next morning unconscious of anything that took place. On seeing Z a few days later, I asked, "Did anything happen at your room on Saturday night?" "Yes," he replied, "a great deal happened." I'd been sitting over the fire with M smoking and chatting. About 12:30 he arose to leave, and I let him out myself. I turned to the fire to finish my pipe when I saw you sitting in the chair just vacated by him. I looked intently at you and then took up a newspaper to assure myself that I wasn't dreaming. But on laying it down again, I saw that you were still there, and while I gazed without speaking, you faded away. Now, some occultists would contend that the foregoing case might readily be accounted for as a thought form. That is, that the will of the person who determined to appear was so powerful that it created his form at that place. But as for me, I have undergone too many of these experiences while conscious ever to accept the thought form theory, although I admit it's a possibility. Just why experimenters should try to discard one seeming miracle by substituting another is beyond me. Is the astral body theory more difficult to accept than the thought form theory? This is just a typical unconscious astral projection. Another explanation advanced is that by means of telepathy, a person might impress his thoughts upon the mind of another, and in some distant place so strongly that the latter would have a telepathic hallucination and believe that he saw someone there. I shall discuss how the mind can create thought forms later. And I think we'll stop there, because it gets creepier and creepier. All right. Smell deception. What's up, Eternal Bliss? KM4 ooze. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's a hiding something, some kind of name or something. But I think it's a good idea, actually, though. If you have somebody, like we all, hopefully you have somebody. I do. I hope you guys do, that you have somebody that you're fond of, that you can have these talks with, that you talk to on a constant basis, that you like. If you like them, that's even better. Friends, intimate partners, maybe you're in between, who knows. Just make sure you're really fond of them and they're willing to try these experiments. If they are, do it, because it's worth it, because you're going to experience some weird stuff if you keep going at it. You guys, if you're really wondering about the astral body when it dies, all 3 books, William Buellman, his books, all these are on Audible. William Buellman, Robert Monroe. And if you still have that question or you're still worried about it, or I don't know if you're worried, it's a good question. It's a good thing to wonder for sure. But if you're worried about it, I would read those books. And I don't think you'll worry so much about it. Or listen to those books. I don't pretend like I'm sitting there with a... Every time I get in bed and open a book, I can't read more than one chapter. I just go out every single time. But an audiobook I can listen to while I'm walking. That's a whole other thing. 3-pound chicken wing, baby. That's what's up. Guys, we need your support. The support has gone. So we need it. If you're already supporting or you're already a Patreon or you already have, thank you guys so much. I love you. You're the best. We'll be back tomorrow night. Of course, the free broadcast, as long as I'm breathing, up to this point, will still be here every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night. And when I launch the first episode, or when we launch the first episode of Fringe FM, make sure you're there to check it out, because the first episode of Fringe FM is about the out-of-body experience. Good night, y'all. Sweet dreams. See you tomorrow night.